When the super empath stops trying, it triggers the avoidant's deepest fear. Have you ever been the person who gives everything, your time, your heart, your patience, only to feel it slipping through your fingers? When a super empath finally stops trying, it's not just a withdrawal, it's a trigger. And for someone who avoids intimacy, it awakens their deepest, unspoken fear. Today, we're going to unpack why this happens and what it really means for your relationships. Here's the truth. People who avoid closeness are experts at keeping distance. And you're the one who's been trying to bridge the gap, to show love and care, to be patient. But when you finally reach your limit and you stop trying, the avoidant partner doesn't feel relief, they feel fear. It's the fear of losing someone who actually sees them, really gets them. You see, super empaths are rare. They feel deeply, they care deeply, and when they withdraw, it's not just a pause, it's a wake-up call. Avoidants don't know how to handle someone stepping back because it forces them to confront what they secretly dread, being alone, without someone who truly understands them. So this isn't about punishing them. It's about honoring yourself and watching the dynamics shift in real time. When you stop trying, the avoidant isn't running away. They're facing a mirror they didn't want to look into. And that, my friends, is where change begins. Being a super empath comes with a unique kind of intensity. You notice the small shifts in tone, the subtle changes in energy, the unspoken needs of everyone around you. You feel other people's emotions as if they were your own, and that's both a gift and a burden. You invest in relationships deeply, not just with attention, but with your heart. You anticipate needs before they're expressed, you adapt, you accommodate, and you forgive more easily than most. But over time, that constant giving takes a toll. It's exhausting because you're not just giving in the moment, you're giving emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. You carry the weight of others' emotions alongside your own. And while you may feel like that's your purpose, it eventually wears you down. What happens when you keep giving and the effort feels one-sided? It starts as subtle fatigue, a little frustration here, a little resentment there, but it grows into a deeper kind of burnout. You start questioning whether your efforts are being appreciated, whether your care is being reciprocated, whether the emotional labor you put in is actually noticed. When you're naturally empathetic, it's hard to admit that you're running out of energy because empathy makes you want to overlook your own limits for the sake of others. But the truth is, there's a point when you reach capacity, and pushing past it doesn't create more love. It just depletes you further. This exhaustion isn't just about feeling tired. It manifests in your body, your mind, and your spirit. You might find yourself emotionally withdrawn even while still physically present, or snapping at small things that never bothered you before. You might feel invisible in a relationship where you've been doing the majority of emotional work, as if your effort doesn't matter. That's because when a super empath gives constantly without boundaries, it often teaches others to take their care for granted. And when that giving stops, it's not because of apathy. It's because the empath finally reaches the point where self-preservation becomes unavoidable. Stopping is not a betrayal or a failure. It's the natural outcome of investing too much without replenishment. It's a pause that your mind, heart, and body demand. You begin to realize that your emotional energy is finite. And if you keep pouring it into someone who cannot meet you halfway, the only outcome is depletion. This is why the moment a super empath stops trying is so significant. It's not just a shift in behavior, it's the emergence of boundaries that were ignored for far too long, and a recognition that self-care is not negotiable. Avoidant individuals live with a fear that most people never see. It's not just a fear of commitment or being tied down. It's a fear of true emotional closeness, of being fully known and understood by someone else. They have learned, often early in life, that vulnerability comes with risk and that risk has a cost. To avoid that cost, they keep emotional distance, protect their inner world, and maintain control over how much of themselves they reveal. On the surface, they might seem independent, self-sufficient, even confident, but underneath, there is a quiet, persistent fear. The fear of being seen for who they really are and rejected for it. This fear shapes every interaction they have. When someone comes along who intuitively understands them, who reads between the lines, who empathizes deeply, it can feel overwhelming. They're not used to being met on such a profound level. Instead of feeling comforted, they often feel exposed. Their automatic reaction is to pull back, to create distance, to regain the sense of control that comes from keeping emotions at bay. The avoidant doesn't consciously choose to hurt anyone. They are simply responding to a fear they can't always name, a fear of intimacy that runs deeper than words. It's paradoxical because the avoidant desires connection just as much as anyone else, but the closer it gets, the louder the alarm inside their mind and heart becomes. The idea of someone understanding them completely, of seeing all their flaws, all their insecurities, and still choosing to stay, that terrifies them. They've often built walls to protect themselves, believing that keeping others at arm's length is safer than risking rejection or loss. And these walls can make them appear distant, aloof, or even disinterested, when in reality they're wrestling with a fear that intimacy will overwhelm them emotionally. When a super empath steps into their life, who is patient, attentive, and unwaveringly present, it can trigger this fear in a very raw way. The avoidant senses the depth of care being offered, and it highlights their own vulnerabilities. They feel the pull of connection, but simultaneously feel the instinct to retreat. This is why avoidance isn't always about rejection. It's about self-protection. They fear that once someone sees them fully, there's no turning back, and that vulnerability is something they've been conditioned to avoid at almost any cost. This underlying fear drives patterns of behavior that can seem confusing or contradictory to others. The avoidant wants love, yet their fear of closeness can make them sabotage it. They crave intimacy, yet they flee when it gets too close. Understanding that their actions are rooted in fear rather than malice helps make sense of the push-pull dynamic that often emerges in relationships with super empaths. When a super empath stops trying, it's not just an absence. It acts like a mirror, reflecting back to the avoidant exactly what they might be on the verge of losing. For someone who is used to keeping emotional distance, this mirror can be uncomfortable, even frightening. They've spent so much time managing their relationships from a safe distance, believing that detachment protects them, but the empath's withdrawal interrupts their carefully maintained equilibrium. Suddenly, they are faced with the reality that someone who truly sees them, who consistently understands and cares for them, is no longer investing the same energy. And that realization can be jarring. The mirror works in a very particular way. It shows the avoidant the consequences of their emotional habits. For years, they might have pushed, pulled, or kept love at arm's length, all the while assuming that the empath would remain endlessly patient. The super empath has often absorbed the brunt of their fear, their distance, their occasional coldness, without complaint. But when that effort stops, the avoidant can no longer take for granted the person who has consistently shown up for them. Suddenly, the absence exposes the gap between desire and reality. They may have thought they were in control of the emotional dynamic, but now they're confronted with the truth. Connection is fragile, and it can vanish if not nurtured. This reflection is uncomfortable because it forces the avoidant to examine their own patterns. They see the value of someone who truly understands them, someone who has been patient and empathetic in ways that few can be. And in that reflection, they also see what their avoidance has cost them: moments of closeness, opportunities for deeper intimacy, and the emotional safety they secretly crave. For many avoidants, this is a difficult realization because it comes without the buffer of the super empath's constant reassurance. There is no mediator, no excuse, no instant forgiveness, just the stark reality of absence. What makes this mirror so powerful is that it doesn't just reveal what they might lose, it triggers self-awareness. Avoidants are often highly skilled at rationalizing and deflecting feelings, but when faced with someone walking away, they cannot easily dismiss the truth. They feel the gap emotionally before they can even articulate it mentally. This is why withdrawal from the empath is so impactful. It bypasses defenses, creates a space for reflection, and demands that the avoidant reckon with the very thing they fear most: the potential loss of a deep, meaningful connection that cannot be replaced easily. When a super empath steps back, creating space rather than chasing, change begins to happen, not because of manipulation or pressure, but because absence itself is a powerful catalyst. Avoidant individuals are accustomed to having relationships operate on their terms, a constant push-pull where distance is maintained, feelings are managed cautiously, and connection is kept just enough to feel safe. But when the empath stops investing in the same way, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, the avoidant is confronted with a space they cannot control, a void where someone who once gave freely and unconditionally is no longer present in the same way. That absence is disruptive, but it is also illuminating. The absence doesn't simply create discomfort, it triggers reflection. Avoidants are forced to notice what they've taken for granted, the patience, the understanding, the unwavering attention they may have relied on without consciously appreciating it. When the super empath steps back, it is almost as if they are holding up a mirror to the avoidant's own behaviors, showing them the gap between what they want and what they're actually doing to sustain it. For someone who fears closeness, that mirror can be disorienting. It challenges the carefully constructed narrative that detachment keeps them safe and exposes the risk of losing something meaningful. Change often happens subtly at first. An avoidant may start to reconsider their habits, test their feelings, or notice their own desire for the connection they have been avoiding. The space created by the empath's withdrawal is not a punishment. It's an invitation for the avoidant to step into their own awareness, to recognize patterns, and to face the emotional consequences of their distance. They begin to feel, sometimes for the first time, the weight of what could be lost and the reality that genuine care is not infinite. The absence awakens a sense of responsibility that proximity and overfamiliarity often suppress. This shift is also about desire. Human beings are naturally drawn to what feels rare, what feels earned, and what is not endlessly available. By stepping back, the super empath allows the avoidant to experience that sense of longing. That recognition, that connection, is valuable precisely because it cannot be taken for granted. It sparks a subtle internal dialogue. Do I want to lose this? Am I willing to change my approach? The empath's withdrawal forces a confrontation with these questions, and while it may be uncomfortable, it also lays the groundwork for meaningful growth and the potential for a healthier, more balanced connection. Boundaries are often misunderstood, especially in relationships with avoidant individuals. For the super empath, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first because their natural instinct is to give, to accommodate, and to absorb the emotions of others. But boundaries are not walls designed to punish. They are a declaration of self-respect and a signal that emotional energy has limits. When a super empath begins to enforce these limits, it sends a message that care and attention are not infinite resources and that they must be honored if the relationship is to remain healthy. This is a profound shift for the avoidant, who is used to maintaining distance and emotional control, and it triggers something deeper than discomfort. It triggers self-reflection. Avoidants are accustomed to operating within predictable dynamics, often using distance as a protective mechanism. When a super empath sets boundaries, it disrupts the status quo. The avoidant can no longer rely on automatic responses or habitual detachment to navigate the relationship. Instead, they are forced to confront the impact of their avoidance on someone who has consistently shown them care. The empath's boundaries illuminate the patterns that the avoidant may have ignored or rationalized for years. They see, perhaps for the first time, that their fear of closeness has consequences, and that the person who has been giving so freely is willing to step back if the dynamic remains unbalanced. This confrontation is rarely comfortable. Avoidants often experience a mix of resistance and curiosity. They may initially react with frustration, guilt, or confusion because boundaries challenge the illusion of control they have carefully maintained. Yet, over time, these boundaries can become a catalyst for growth. By protecting their emotional energy, the super empath forces the avoidant to wrestle with the discomfort of self-awareness, to recognize the value of genuine connection, and to consider whether they are willing to adjust their patterns to preserve it. The absence of constant availability awakens a desire to bridge the gap in a healthier, more intentional way. Boundaries also communicate something crucial. that love and care are not a one-way street. They teach avoidants that emotional reciprocity matters, that giving freely without recognition can lead to imbalance, and that relationships require effort from both parties. This can trigger a powerful internal reckoning, prompting the avoidant to consider their fears, to examine their coping mechanisms, and to assess whether they are capable of meeting someone halfway. Boundaries are not just rules, they are the framework within which meaningful change becomes possible. Ultimately, when a super empath enforces limits, it creates a scenario in which avoidants can no longer hide behind habitual patterns. The avoidant is confronted with both the risk of loss and the possibility of growth, making the relationship a space where authenticity, self-awareness, and emotional depth can emerge. So, what does all of this teach us? It teaches us that love, connection, and empathy are not about endless giving without boundaries. They're about balance. When a super empath finally stops trying, it's not rejection or cruelty, it's a necessary act of self-respect. And in that moment, the avoidant is faced with their deepest fear, the possibility of losing someone who truly sees them. This is where transformation can happen. Change doesn't come from chasing, pleading, or forcing. It comes from stepping back, holding your boundaries, and allowing the other person to confront their own emotions. And even if the relationship doesn't survive, you've done something far more important. You've honored yourself, your energy, and your worth. So to anyone listening today, remember this: your care is precious, your empathy is a gift, and your boundaries are your strength. Never be afraid to pause, to step back, and to reclaim your energy. The people who are meant to stay will rise to meet you in the space you create, and the ones who don't, well, that's just clarity giving you the freedom to find someone who truly deserves your heart. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, for reflecting on your own patterns, and for being brave enough to honor your emotional truth. I hope this conversation gives you courage, insight, and a renewed sense of confidence in how you navigate relationships. From my heart to yours, thank you. Take care of yourself and keep showing up, not for everyone, but for those who truly see and value you. Goodbye, and remember, honoring yourself is the first step toward any meaningful connection.